I've had a problem with looter shooters for a while now. In fact, to be more accurate, I've had an issue with them since my very first outing into the genre, Borderlands 2. While they're a great, really strong element that made that game a really interesting and cool title, I could immediately identify the multiple frailties that were riddled in this style of game design. And with the release of Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League, the failure of that game and the many issues that continue to persist with their live content model clearly showed to me that looter shooters and the live service model seems to be a combination that's a recipe for disaster, no matter how you slice it. So, after close analysis, we're going to be discussing the problem with looter shooters. So before we go on right ahead to decipher the frailties of this very lucrative game genre, let's first define amply what exactly a looter shooter is. Looter shooters is in fact a subgenre of the action-adventure or RPG genre. The essence of these games is to take a gameplay style that focuses on exhilarating first or third-person shooting with procedurally generated weapons and equipment. Basically, you and your friends log into a game, shoot NPCs and enemies, then pick up and drop stuff as you continue with whatever you're trying to accomplish. While I do think this genre is deeply flawed, it's definitely not all bad. Now, as I mentioned before, Borderlands 2 was my first experience with the looter shooter genre. What stood out to me was the outstanding and very unique art style. While I personally didn't vibe with the humorous and sarcastic dialogue that the series is loved for, what kept me engaged was the superb gunplay. And this is something I have to commend the entire genre on. While looter shooters have gotten a bad rap for many missteps along their journeys, gameplay and structure is an aspect that these guys usually knock out of the park. Instability, bugs, bad optimization, low performance, and low frame rates, these are constant issues that persist in the entire gaming community. But for looter shooters, everything tends to work, even at launch. The upgrade systems are clear and concise, the gameplay is smooth, and the loot is of course plentiful. These game companies and these games tend to go wrong in other aspects. The live service model is an aspect of gaming I've always had an issue with ever since it was popularized during the last 2 decades. Outside of PvP multiplayer games such as Fortnite, Apex, Call of Duty, MMORPGs and other types of things, this live service model definitely doesn't belong in these genres. Many companies have used this method to provide an unfinished game or promise to deliver content that was supposed to have come with the game at launch. But then what is the constant excuse that they come to? No, it'll all be filled in and fixed in upcoming patches. Imagine going into a grocery store and buying a slice of cake. All you want is a single serving of cake to satisfy you. But instead of giving you the entire slice all at once, you get pieces of the cake delivered slowly to you over a 7-day period. That would be pretty frustrating as you paid full price for the entire slice up front. You'll get the entire slice eventually, but your frustration might even prevent you from sticking around to even collect it at that point. And unfortunately, in the looter shooter genre, there are a number of titles that fit into this exact category that I mentioned today. Even games that are now considered great titles in the gaming community, such as Destiny. Now, back in the day, I had a friend who was hyped out of his mind about Destiny way back in high school. You'd swear he was being paid by Bungie to market the game himself. But when it finally dropped, my friend and of course the entire gaming community was up in arms from the lack of content and a narrative that ultimately falls flat or feels missing. The live service model has become a crutch that many games in different genres rely on to release games that never should have made it to the shelf in the first place. Now, not long ago, about last year, I played and reviewed Anthem for the very first time. Playing Anthem in 2023 was more like a post-homicide investigation than an interesting gameplay experience. From the non-existent player base and the empty shell of a game that BioWare was unable to fill with depth what they're usually able to fulfill quite well in their single-player RPGs. Depth. That brings me to the most substantial reason looter shooters as a genre, in my opinion, will always be perpetually flawed no matter what you do. When I played the Borderlands 2 for the first time on my PC many years ago, it was a pretty cool and interesting experience, but throughout my time on the title, I always felt like something was missing, like there was an aspect that was needed to take this experience to the next level, and way back then I couldn't pinpoint what exactly that thing was. The gameplay was good, the art style was cool, but something was still lacking. What it lacked was substance. I then came to the realization that the hole that was diminishing the experience could only be supplemented by friends. I was playing the game solo. The game definitely gives you the option to do so, of course. But over time I realized that the best case scenario is to play this title with a packed lobby full of friends. I saw this from the disjointed and sparse story that was presented to the player. The lackluster mission design and objectives, the bullet spongy bosses, and the very forgettable side quests and the dialogue that's littered throughout the entire campaign. I thought, maybe it's just Borderlands 2. Maybe these issues are addressed in their newer titles. I experienced the very same issues in the pre-sequel, Borderlands 3, Anthem, and even Destiny 2. It's clear to me that these games truly rely on the player's engagement being turned away to their friends, so you ignore these partially developed structures. If you play a looter shooter game start to finish, completely solo, you'll probably have a solid and okay experience. But as soon as you compare that experience to the multiple single player shooters and RPGs out in the market, in comparison these games come up really short. Now, I completely understand. There'll be guys who are saying, yo bro, that's not what these games are built for. They're built for an online experience and for you to play with your friends. Now, that's fair. I understand if you feel that way, and you may have your own opinions on that stance. The reason why I think this is a genuine gripe is because looter shooters are created and intended to be played in the same way as any other action single player games. The only difference is that consumers expect less when going into this experience. This ends up in an experience where loot means absolutely nothing, as the endless amounts of computer generated loot become so plentiful you're changing your loadout every 2 to 3 missions. The loot from a quality perspective is simply low, as we of course know that none of the items that we're going to be dealing with is handcrafted. The quests you complete and end up with are kind of just an excuse for you and your friends to keep playing the game instead of telling a riveting story that needs to be told. If you can't play a looter shooter game solo, it's clear to me that the issue isn't that I'm playing this game alone and not with my friends. The issue is that the developers didn't create and cater an experience that was good enough to stand upon its own 2 feet. Now, this isn't a player versus player game, PvP, where the player versus player interaction is vital for the game to even work. Looter shooters are fundamentally still single-player games that get away with being mediocre in essential aspects, hoping that their frailties and imperfections will be clouded by the good time that you have with your friends. Doing anything with your friends is fun, so playing a looter shooter with the friends that you hold dear should only be a supplementary enhancement to an already great gaming experience. So I hope that the next time I hop into a looter shooter or sometime in the future, I play one where I'm not just mesmerized by the exhilarating gameplay, but because of every single aspect being crafted to a high level.